The third-floor corridor always seemed longer at night, but that morning something was different in the air. The team was chatting near the break room, exchanging trivial stories, when an almost imperceptible change silenced all voices. First, it was the temperature, a chilly breeze that ran down everyone's spine as if invisible doors had opened to a distant winter. Then came the heaviness, a strange density that seemed to suck the air from their lungs, forcing them to breathe more slowly. Everyone instinctively turned toward the end of the corridor. In the flickering light of an old lamp, there was a silhouette, tall, still, featureless, as if the shadow itself had broken free from the wall. It didn't approach, didn't retreat. It simply watched. No sound accompanied it, no movement betrayed its presence. It was a sliver of darkness slicing through the light, perfectly still, and yet it seemed to breathe with them, in unison, as if waiting for the right moment to take the next step. The silence stretched like a thread about to snap. One of the nurses tried to break the tension with a nervous laugh, but the sound died away, swallowed by something that wasn't an echo. The figure, previously static, moved its head slowly, as if scanning the room, and a damp glow reflected where its face should have been. The lights above flickered, plunging the hallway into brief seconds of total darkness. When the light returned, the silhouette was closer, perhaps 3 or 4 steps away, though no one had heard footsteps. The cold intensified, burning the skin like dry ice. A sharp crack echoed from the ceiling, but everyone knew the sound wasn't coming from there. One of those present took a hesitant step back, and it was at that moment that the figure did something none of them would forget. It raised its arm, pointing directly at the door behind them, the same one where, hours earlier, a patient had been found dead of no apparent cause. Everyone's breath stopped. The light flickered again. St. Helena Medical Center's north wing, 3rd floor, 1924 walls, patched with rushed renovations, corridors echoing footsteps, and a cold that seemed to seep from the plaster. Between 3 and 4 a.m., the dead hour, staff on Ward N3 moved through quiet tasks, checking IVs, calming a patient in 305. The fluorescent hum mingled with stale coffee, and Nurse Amanda Walker, after 8 years, knew every creak of the floor. Beside her were Ezra, quick with jokes, and Louise, the superintendent, gripping her clipboard. At 3:09, the nurse's station monitors flickered, just enough for Amanda to glance from the chart of bed 312, where a patient had died the night before. Minutes later, the air cooled, sound thinned, and eyes turned to the end of the hallway where an old lamp swayed. A tall, blurred silhouette appeared, silent, drawing all attention. Ezra's humor faltered. Louise clutched her clipboard, and Amanda recalled her grandmother's words about old places holding memories. The figure raised an arm, not toward them, but to the sealed door of 312, and with that simple gesture, the longest night began. No one agreed, but all stepped forward, bodies deciding before minds. Ezra's radio hissed. Louise's intercom was dead. Amanda, nearest 312, touched the doorknob, so cold her palm stuck. "It won't open," Louise said. At the corridor's end, the silhouette tilted its head, half human, half wrong. A click above, lamps flickered, and the shadow advanced without moving. At 312, a monitor beeped in 308. Amanda resisted the reflex to respond. The figure pointed firmly at 312. Louise's badge flashed green, but steam leaked from the door's base, winter spilling out. "Maybe someone inside," Ezra said. "Someone sealed in after death." The radio whispered in an unrecognizable, wet voice. The shadow shifted closer. Amanda stepped back. "If this is a joke, it's over," Ezra blurted. The half-lit hall revealed not a body, but an absence, its face an oval of flickering dark. At 313, 308's beeping stopped. On 312's frosted glass, an oval mark appeared, as if a forehead pressed from within. The shadow lowered its finger to the floor, where condensation spread into the shape of feet. The most logical path was the security checkpoint, 2 doors down, where monitors displayed tired views of the hospital. Amanda and Louise entered first. Ezra remained in the hallway, a courage that tried to appear casual. The night guard, Ortiz, chewed gum and fumbled. With a styrofoam cup, he lifted his chin in greeting, ready for the routine, and stopped when he saw their faces. "Rewind the N3 cameras," Louise asked, without explaining. Ortiz touched the keyboard. The screen split in 4. In the upper left corner, the hallway, full length, 312 in profile. Now 310 to 314. The footage ran. Nothing. An empty hallway, stable, as if the building were perfect. Again. The same emptiness. Ezra on the radio. She pointed again. Ortiz frowned, scratching his beard. "There's no one there." Amanda brought her face closer to the screen, as if she could force the image to confess. "And the reflections." Ortiz blinked. "What reflections?" "The glass of 312. He switched the camera to the angle that captured the glass, but only the outside, the whitish film. Pause, play, pause, nothing. Louise placed her hand on the metal table and felt, coming from below, a subtle, rhythmic tremor. Not a generator vibration, but something pulsing, almost cardiac. "Is there a camera that captures the window at the end of the hallway?" Amanda asked. Ortiz switched to a wide view, where, in the background, a dark square suggested the window. "Zoom in." The zoom burst the image into blocks, but enough to see one thing. In the window glass, the night reflected a longer hallway than that, and there, in the imperfect reflection, was a spot darker than darkness, motionless. There. Ortiz held his breath. In the video, the hallway light flickered, and the spot in the reflection jerked forward, even though in the main camera the hallway remained empty. "This is interference," he said, a phrase he used when the world failed to fit into the system. Amanda touched the screen with her fingertip, following the reflected shadow, and the monitor clock in the corner froze for a second at 03:12. When time resumed, an event log appeared in the margin. "Frame discontinuity." Ortiz swore softly. Louise opened the emergency key cabinet, hesitating. "If there's no one in the hallway, why are we cold?" As if listening, Ezra's radio crackled with a sound like liquid being sucked through a straw, and a syllable, almost a word, came through from nowhere. "No." Ortiz went white, pulled out his headphones, and checked other wings. The sound wasn't coming from there. Amanda thought instinctively, if the camera can't see it, the mirror can. If the lens denies, the glass confesses. "Cameras don't record what doesn't pass through the light properly," he said, uncertain of anything. And then he remembered. 312. In the previous night's report, the dead man's heart monitor had registered a 12-second pause at 3:12, followed by normalization and, 20 minutes later, silent death. The number repeated the room, repeated the minute. Ortiz switched to the patient of 312, the sealed room, the empty bed. Nothing. And yet, at the edge of the image, a sliver of vapor hovered low on the floor, like an animal breathing softly. Amanda looked at Louise and understood that. The decision would be theirs, not protocol's. But before continuing the story, check if you are already subscribed to the channel, because there is a new video here every day. Louise knew the hospital's paperwork like someone who knows a city map. The North Wing reopened in 1978, but the skeleton is from 1924, he said, pulling out an old drawer where grey paper folders hid dusty dates. Ortiz, restless, kept half his attention on the screens, half on their hands. Amanda sifted through archived reports, a habit inherited from a boss who said the past is stubborn, it insists on returning if ignored. They found newspaper clippings. 1928 flu fills wards. Wings isolated due to risk of contagion. Basement converted into quarantine room. Faded blueprints showed no longer existing corridors and condemned doors buried under cement. A hand-drawn arrow indicated a flight of stairs at the end of N3, now covered by a technical exit restricted access sign. "Does this still exist?" Amanda asked. Ortiz nodded. "It exists, but it's padlocked and dusty, storage for old equipment." Louise fingered a penciled notation on the floor plan. ST, Old Surgical Theatre. Use suspended. A stapled note, undated, bore a slanted handwriting. "When it suddenly gets cold in the hallway, don't open doors. Wait, they'll pass." Amanda swallowed. "Who are they?" Ezra on the radio. "Condensation has increased. There are footprints. 2, lined up, stationary." Ortiz pulled out a box labeled Incident Records, 1980s, 1990s. Brief, bureaucratic, yet strangely repetitive reports. Sudden drop in temperature, shadow without source, report of noises without origin, request for room change due to unspecific discomfort in N3. On 2, the time, 3:12. Louise closed the folder slowly, as if a lid were closing over something alive. "St. Helena is older than he looks," he said, "and he seems to remember." As they spoke, the intercom died completely, and the generator panel gave a wobble that made Ortiz curse. He manually adjusted the ward circuit, a practice he learned from those who retire by surviving, and it became clear. The outage was coming from within, not from the network. Amanda searched her memory for logic. Arrows, dates, the uncaused death the day before, the reflection that saw what the camera denied, the warning, "Do not open doors when the cold arrives." Behind them, on the gas station's glass, 3 breathing dots appeared, those circles we make, without realizing it, when we put our face close to the glass on a freezing day. But no one was that close to the glass. 3 breaths drawn by someone inside. "They pass," Amanda repeated, testing the plural in her mouth. What if that in the hallway wasn't the threat, but the warning? Back in the hallway, Ezra stared at 312 like someone watching a rare animal, unable to decide whether to flee or approach. The cold was no longer an event. It was the weather. The steam at the door's baseboard had increased, and the marks on the floor were photographically clear. 2 bare feet. Amanda noticed a new detail, the line of condensation at the mattress on the inside of the glass, rising and falling in rhythm with breathing. "Someone's lying down," he whispered, and hated his own whisper as if giving form to the idea. Louise put her ear to the crack in the door, imprudence informed by urgency, and heard something that wasn't a word, a sound like ice cracking in the sun. "Whatever it is, you're asking for it." "Asking for what?" Ezra demanded without moving closer. The clock chimed 3:20. The light flickered. The mattress, visible through the frosted glass, sank slowly, centered, as if an invisible weight sat down and then lay down. Amanda felt the memory of the previous day's death in her chest. She imagined the sheet descending without a hand. The radio hissed again, this time with a clipped phrase. A distant voice, perhaps male, perhaps just human desire shaping the noise. A bra." "Don't open." Amanda held her breath. It was the same intuition written in the old note. What if what's in the hallway doesn't want to go into 312? The hypothesis hovered like dust in a backlight. The silhouette far away kept its arm pointed at the floor, and the lamp above it died completely, plunging the end of the hallway into a black ink painting. At 3:12, the sinking stopped. The atmosphere, however, didn't ease. It seemed to be waiting for the mistake. Louise marked the wax. Tape with an X, a gesture that resolved nothing but gave fear a form of ritual. Ezra, restless, tapped his foot and realized the sound didn't return, as if the floor swallowed the beats so as not to disturb someone sleeping. Whatever it is, you know we're here. An empty gurney leaning against the wall made a soft noise, sliding 2 centimeters on its own. Amanda got the message. Movement without a body is no accident. She returned to her station, grabbed a thermal blanket, not for anyone, but for the idea that cold steals decisions, and when she returned, the silhouette was no longer at the end of the corridor. For a second, everyone thought, it's over. It was worse. It was now halfway down the hall, clear enough for them to see that, where eyes should have been, there were 2 reflections, like water surfaces that don't get wet, and for the first time, Amanda felt it wasn't looking at them, but through them, like someone checking to see if a door behind them is locked. Amanda stood in the background as Louise went to check on the 305. Ezra, sent to the garage to get flashlights under the pretense of, in case the power goes out, disappeared down the hallway, wanting to be somewhere other than that. For a few minutes, Amanda remained alone with the silhouette and the 312. The silence was grainy, like an old cassette tape. She stared at the 312's glass. The milky, opaque film revealed only an outline of whatever was nearby, and saw her own shadow on the surface. But there was something wrong with the timing. Her movement arrived 1/10 of a second too late, as if the image needed to remember the gesture before copying it. She moved her hand. The shadow followed suit. She turned her face. The dark oval responded a moment later. And then, on the polished metal bar below the glass, the chrome that was cleanliness and utility, she noticed a second reflection, more sincere than the glass. There, the silhouette at the end of the hallway appeared where it shouldn't, as if the bar acted like a thin line of water. Amanda raised her phone to use the camera as a mirror. On the screen over her shoulder, the figure was closer than the physical distance indicated. The phone froze at 312. An old notification flashed out of nowhere. New memory available, something the device sometimes suggested, with photos from the past. She tapped it without thinking. The gallery opened to an image of 312 from the previous day, when she had quickly checked the room before sealing it. In the corner of the photo, she swears it wasn't there. A humanoid blur rested on the edge of the frame, almost a glitch in the light. Amanda's heart raced. She lowered the phone. The silhouette kept its head tilted, that uncomfortable half-human. "You don't want to come in," it said, not to hear an answer, but to test the world. The radio in her pocket responded with scratchy static, and then, clearly, a single word emerged like someone learning to speak. Corridor. The hallway. Not the bedroom. Behind Amanda, the light bulb in 312 turned on by itself, an unmistakable luminosity seeping through the crack in the door like thin milk. Of the half-domestic bulbs, 3 burst with tiny pops, and in the momentary darkness that followed, the cold rose to the point of aching teeth. Amanda remembered her brother months earlier admitted to another hospital. The early morning hours when she swore she saw someone standing at his door, a memory she shelved under fatigue. At that moment, fatigue took on a different name. She took 2 steps back, keeping 312 to her right and her silhouette in front. Inside the glass, a handprint appeared, 5 fingers extended, and this time there was no doubt. The hand was coming from below, as if someone, lying down, asking for help to keep from moving. The radio crackled again, but the voice cracked like ice in the sun. "No, a bruh." Repetition as a request. And Amanda finally understood the task. Keeping the door closed wasn't giving up. It was protection. Have you ever witnessed a supernatural event? Tell us your story in the comments. Dr. Marcus Reed arrived at N3, summoned by Louise for power outage and anomalies in 312. Terms clinical enough to fit on a single page of a report and yet convey almost nothing. Reed belonged to a generation that trusted the tangible: saturation, pressure, enzymes, graphs. "Shadows don't kill anyone," was the first sentence, a shield called skepticism. Ortiz, over the now stutteringly resurrected intercom, reported the screens freezing at precisely 3:12. Reed shook his head. Synchronization of events at a common time. Trigger. Amanda was in no mood to lecture. She placed 3 printouts before him. Cardiac records of the deceased from 3:12, with the pause at 3:12. A 1992 history with the same record, another from 1985, and finally a copy of the old memo that advised not to open doors when the cold arrived. Reed sighed. Coincidence is more common than it seems. And condensation. Leaving footprints too, Amanda replied. The doctor bit his lip and suggested a test. Open an empty room with sensors and observe changes in temperature and pressure. Not 3:12, Amanda insisted. Reed chose 3:14. They set up a portable thermometer, placed a stainless steel tray on the floor to see if the metal would tell anything, and waited. The 3:12 strike on the station's analog clock seemed promising. The hand reached the minute, and just then the thermometer dropped 2 degrees in 20 seconds. The stainless steel tray made a dripping sound, as if something cold had touched its surface. On the door, a circle of condensation appeared and disappeared. Reed's eyes widened, the kind of expression a skeptic later writes off as unexpected environmental effect. "Okay," he said, "we have a duct problem." Ortiz responded over the radio. "Ducts don't make footprints." Reed stared down the hallway. The silhouette, motionless ahead, now pointed not only at 3 and 12, but alternated between the sealed door and, slowly, the technical exit restricted access sign at the end of N3. The warning finger wasn't threatening. "What's behind that door?" he asked. "Old basement," Louise said. "Operating theater, quarantine, things the hospital chose to forget." Reed adjusted his lab coat, a useless gesture in a cold that doesn't respect fabric, and decided, "We'll see." Amanda felt the night had more flaws than the building. They set off as a group, Reed, Amanda, Louise, and Ezra, with Ortiz bringing up the rear on the radio, monitors exchanging images like eyes. The restricted access door resisted the badge. An old padlock completed the scene. Ezra brought out a pair of industrial pliers, his knuckles white with strength and fear. The metal gave way with a short scream. In the background, the silhouette remained still. Guard or judge? Impossible to decide. They descended a narrow staircase, concrete steps, sweating with humidity, to landing B1, a corridor parallel to the one. Above, but lower and damper. Sparse bulbs, some dead, others insisting on a short flicker. The generator chose that moment to cough electricity. The lights began to flicker, creating the worst kind of movement, the kind that exists only between light and blackout. With each turn on, the corridor felt a step smaller. With each turn off, the cold climbed a notch. Reed's wristwatch stopped at 3:12. Amanda's too. Electronic interference was the last rational sentence in the sequence. On the wall, an enamel sign, ST, Surgical Theatre. The double doors had round windows covered with paint on the inside. Amos took turns with the flashlights. Ezra shone his light on the floor and held his breath. Regular barefoot footprints walked to the door and stopped, no turning back, as if they'd entered and not left, he said softly. The flickering of the lamps coincided with a damp breath passing by them, not wind, but a shifting presence, and Amanda, reflected in a cracked glass to her left, noticed she wasn't alone in the reflection. Behind her, in the imperfect mirror, a human outline hovered a step beyond the group, though when she turned, no one was there. "Reflections warn," she murmured. Reed touched the theatre doorknob. ice inside. Louise raised her clipboard without knowing why, an instinct to shield her face from an idea. Ortiz's radio screeched. "Be careful, pressure gauges on N3 have varied. 312, registered weight on the bed." The clicking of the lights grew more frantic. In the darkness between the openings, the silhouette of the upper floor seemed to fall upon them like a shadow cast on a staircase, and somehow everyone understood that the thing up there didn't want them to open the one below. "If the threat is on this side, why freeze 314 and lie on 3112's bed?" Reed asked, not waiting for an answer. Amanda, without releasing her flashlight, spoke to someone who was nowhere to be seen. "If you understand, tell us how to stop." The door responded with a sound unbecoming of metal, a long, deep sigh that vibrated in the ribs, and then from the round windows a pale light poured in, not electric light, something like dead moonlight. The cold turned moral, the kind that judges. Inside the ST, the air had the density of an old basement and a sickly sweetness reminiscent of ether. Iron beds, tables on wheels, a disabled speaker in a corner. On a shelf, boxes with "Records QUA" scrawled in pencil. Louise ripped the ribbon off one of them. Among the papers, they found a hardcover notebook, green fabric, now grey, edges gnawed. On the title page, "Quarantine Ward, 1928. The handwriting was slanted, firm. "When it gets cold, close the doors. Don't argue." They passed through the corridor like thinking smoke. It was signed H.D., perhaps Helena Doyle, head nurse. There was a shaky portrait of her in a photo hanging in the upstairs hallway. The following pages mixed protocols with confessions. There was a case where the shadow wouldn't come in. It wanted to stop us from opening. At 312, always the pause happens. Mirrors are more honest than lamps. Reed, clinging to any logical rock, read silently, each sentence seeming to lift a stone from a dike. Ezra, curious at his own expense, leafed faster. Here, theatre sealed after... The next line stained with water. Another page. The boy who returned only in his reflection. Amanda closed her eyes for a moment, not out of faith, but to align her fear with a function. Protecting doors, preventing opening, obeying the cold as a warning. From the dead speaker, a distant, impossible hiss cut through the air. Ortiz was saying something, but the words came in reverse, like a tape rewinding. Ezra adjusted the radio. 312 is stabilizing. The bed won't sink anymore. They looked at each other. "If we close it here, maybe it will stop up there," Amanda said. Reed nodded, annoyed at having agreed to a chance of wind. They examined the door from the inside. Old. Mechanisms, only manual locks. They reinforced it with a heavier stretcher and a steel bar. The temperature rose a degree, as a thank you. The clock unlocked. 3:19. Brief relief. In the cracked mirror, Amanda saw the outline behind the group again, the same height as the silhouette in the runner above. She turned, empty. In the notebook, the last lines of 1928. When the cold comes, they want warning, not out of malice, but out of habit. Don't open, the door is a lung. Amanda closed the notebook, taking it with her, as if carrying the words of someone who has seen the same winter. They ascended. N3 seemed larger, as if the stairs had returned a floor longer than they had descended. The silhouette, now a few meters away, didn't advance. Its immobility was an act. Amanda understood that two contexts ran parallel, one inside, the other outside. In 312, the graphs had normalized, normal for an empty room. The bed had returned to the horizontal line of common sense. At the same time, a new patient in 318, admitted with mild chest pain, began pressing the call, gasping, "Someone's standing there!" Reed rushed over, found saturation at 89, tachycardia. He treated it as an emergency, and the crisis subsided as quickly as it had begun, as if a non-physiological weight had been lifted from the man's chest. "Did he say he saw someone?" Amanda asked. "A figure in the doorway," Reed replied, without giving a name so as not to give away the context. At the station, Ortiz adjusted a camera to baseboard height, a stupid idea that, for that very reason, worked. At ground level, the lenses captured small trails of condensation advancing against the normal airflow, as if an invisible crowd were following a script. The trail skirted doors, never penetrating rooms, except under 312. The silhouette in the background seemed to monitor this traffic, alternating its finger, floor, 312, exit sign. "Two things," Amanda said, as if dictating a report from her own intuition. "One prevents, the other requires." The lights all came on at once. The hospital breathed light, and for a few seconds, the world returned to its axis. That's when the elevator at the end of the corridor opened by itself. Empty. The indicator descended to B2, a level beyond the basement they had seen. "There is no B2, Louise said. The elevator rose empty, the doors opened, and in the interior mirror, the hallway appeared without them, but with the silhouette standing where, in reality, there was no one. Reed looked at 312, then at the elevator, then at Amanda, and the sum of all his skepticism became a strategy. "If the door is a lung, we don't let anyone breathe in." He ordered backup, tape, chains, whatever. The silhouette didn't object. Over the radio, Ortiz swore he heard a child's voice whisper, "Thank you," before the wheezing swallowed the word. The clock read 312 again, though it wasn't. "Are we stuck in a minute?" Ezra whispered. "Maybe." 312 stuck at the hospital as the official time for something with no scheduled meeting. The cold returned to its peak, and an internal wind born from nowhere crossed the N3 from end to end, extinguishing the lamps in sequence like blown matches. Flashlights streaked across pale cones. In the darkness, noises that only exist in darkness, metal expanding and contracting, breathing that cannot be assumed, the rhythm of footsteps that leave no sound. The silhouette, now 3 meters away, seemed larger, or the corridor smaller. Amanda raised the flashlight to her face and realized that the beam didn't penetrate. It deflected, like water hitting invisible stone. "We're not opening," he said, not as a challenge, but as a declaration. The radio responded with static of approval. The door of 312 groaned, a wooden sound that shouldn't have been there, and for an instant, the wax tape tensed like a candle in the wind. Louise pressed her body against the door. Reed stopped the current. Ezra lined up 2 stretchers to act as a barricade. The silhouette lowered its arm. It turned its head toward the elevator. The doors opened, revealing the empty cabin, the mirror inside, and in the mirror, only in the mirror, a second presence, something more diffuse, made of pure low temperature, a distortion of air that made the skin crawl just looking at it. The mirror thing advanced 2 steps into the image without the real cabin revealing anything. Amanda pulled the stretcher and guided the polished surface toward the door of 312, making the metal a makeshift mirror. The distortion in the elevator mirror hesitated, as if the new surface had imposed a rule. "Mirrors are more honest," the notebook reminded her. Amanda lined up other metals, a tray, a stainless steel wastebasket, the shiny frame of the clock. It formed a broken but effective line of reflections. As the mirror thing advanced further, the line bounced off the image like a blade of light, refusing to penetrate murky water. The 312 calmed down. The silhouette fixed its gesture on the technical exit sign, a gesture of farewell, of instruction. The clock ticked toward 321 as if a string had snapped. The lights cascaded back on. A timid warmth restored sensation to Amanda's fingers. The night, however, didn't untie the knot. It formed a loop. Days later, as management posted notices about a power surge, reports trickled through the hallways. A paramedic swore that as he parked his stretcher at N3, his watch changed to 3:12 for a full minute, even though it was 10 p.m. Next door, the window fogged up, writing "Cold Stay" from the inside out. A radiology technician said she saw, on the black screen of the switched-off CT scanner, a row of shadows waiting, disciplined, staring at the door to 3:12, like patients in an ancient triage that never ended. A janitor told of the elevator that descended on its own to B2 and returned with handprints on the mirror, small, like those of a child, none of them matching the height of the buttons. In the maintenance log, someone noted a long whistling noise coming from the grates at 3:12, a sound that stopped when they covered the grates with mirrors, an ad-lib that became internal folklore. Ortiz, a week later, reviewed the cameras and found, in a lost frame, the entire team in the hallway looking at something out of frame. Zooming in, he realized that the out of frame was the hallway itself reflected in the window, and there, perfectly still, was the silhouette. Guardian or jailer, no one can decide. A new nurse, just arrived, asked why 312 was never occupied for long. "Bad luck," they said, with a laugh that begged the pardon of fear. Amanda, who had tucked the 1928 notebook into her backpack with the seriousness of someone keeping a survival recipe, wrote at the bottom of a report, "When it suddenly gets cold, don't open doors. Wait, they'll pass." And no one laughed. The hospital continued as everyone else does. Medications at 8 a.m., visits at 2 p.m., discharge at 5 p.m. But at N3, the night has a crack that won't close. Between 3:12 a.m. and the next minute, something ancient reviews routes, checks doors, makes sure no one will make the mistake of opening the building's lungs when it needs to exhale. Amanda learned the modest logic of certain terrors. There are things that don't want to enter. They want to prevent them. There are others that only exist in the path of light, and so the glass reveals them, the camera denies them. Somewhere, beneath the concrete, a sealed operating theatre maintains the silence of a quarantine that never received a discharge. And sometimes, when the elevator breathes on its own, the doors open to a floor that doesn't exist on the maps, where the mirror shows what reality wouldn't admit, that the line between warning and threat is as thin as cold. On the last morning of the month, Amanda stopped at the nurses' station, looked down the long corridor, and saw, at the end, the silhouette. He didn't feel fear as before. He felt responsibility. She raised her hand in a small wave, a gesture of acknowledgement between shifts on the same job. The figure didn't respond, but the lamp above her stabilized. The clock struck 3:11, past 3:12 without a stumble, and the night continued as usual. Only later, reviewing the images, did Amanda realize something that left her with a question no report supports. In the window's reflection, the one standing at the end of the hallway was her. Same posture, same stillness, as if for a moment she had been called to take the place of the one who warns. Maybe we are all, on certain nights, guardians of doors we didn't even know we needed to keep closed. And maybe doubt is the mechanism that keeps the right door locked. At St. Helena, no one laughs anymore when the air suddenly freezes. They wait and let it pass. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos.